Before fear, there was silence. The plains of southern Africa slept under a scorching sun, where dust mingled with the scent of buffalo and dried blood. For years, lone males roamed Sabi Sand seeking more than territory. They sought purpose. And in 2006, 6 of them found each other to change everything. They were called the Mapogos. 6 lions united by blood, fury, and a hunger for dominance. Under the guidance of the old Makulu, the one with the black mane, they began as a brotherhood, but soon became an army that knew no bounds. In their wake, the roars died down. Entire prides disappeared overnight. No one was safe. Not rival males, not lionesses, not cubs. Their kingdom was not built on alliances, but on corpses. For 6 years, the name Mapogo would be uttered with fear, even among the most powerful lions on the continent. And among them, one would stand out above all others. Mr. T, the lion who defied his own brothers, devoured his enemies, and became a legend stained with blood. But every empire has its price. And the story of the Mapogos is not only one of power, but of the beginning of the end. Before continuing, take a moment. If you want strength, abundance, and prosperity to come into your life like this video, share it and comment on where you are watching it from. Do it now, because in the coming days, a miracle of abundance and balance may come your way. And if you want to honor this story and support our pride, use the super thanks button below. Whether it's $5, $20, or $100, every contribution keeps the real legends of Africa alive and helps us continue to bring the stories of the true kings of the savannah to life. In 2006, the Mapogo coalition emerged in the heart of Sabi Sand, a private reserve bordering Kruger National Park. 6 adult males formed the group, strong, experienced, and perfectly adapted to the terrain. Their union immediately altered the balance of power. In a region where most coalitions consisted of 2 or 3 males, 6 together meant unprecedented strength. Their first recorded action occurred earlier that year. A rival coalition of 4 males dominated the northern part of the territory, controlling several herds with young calves. The Mapogos tracked them for days, taking advantage of the darkness to close the distance. When they attacked, they did so with precision and brutality. 3 of the males were killed before dawn. The 4th disappeared without a trace. Control of northern Sabi Sand changed hands in a single night. From then on, the Mapogos began a systematic expansion. Their method was straightforward: attack, eliminate, and occupy. Each conquest expanded their territorial control and reduced competition. Within a few weeks, they extended their presence westward, displacing entire prides. Traces of blood and the ensuing silence became clear signs of their advance. No coalition in the region had ever achieved such rapid control. Hunting was another reflection of their power. Unlike most lions, the Mapogos did not rely solely on lionesses. They hunted on their own, coordinated, even against large prey. Attacks were recorded against adult buffalo, young rhinos, and weakened hippos. Their ability to take down such large animals showed a level of collective strength uncommon among African lions. By mid-2007, the Mapogos already controlled several prides between the Sand River and the Manyeleti River. Their domain covered nearly 160,000 acres, an exceptionally large territory for a single coalition. Within that space, the natural balance shifted. Numerous cubs were killed, a common biological behavior in newly arrived males, but taken to extremes by the size of the group. In less than 2 years, more than 100 cubs were recorded as dead or missing. Each raid followed the same pattern. The males patrolled in shifts, marking their territory with urine and roars, and responding to any unfamiliar noise with immediate force. Their patrols were constant, leaving a landscape of trees torn by claws and trails marked by the passage of heavy bodies. Young elephants scattered at their presence. Hyenas avoided the areas where they hunted. Their fame spread beyond Sabi Sand. Safari guides began to identify them by their features. Makulu, the one with the black mane, Mr. T with his dark tuft and powerful neck, Kinky Tail with the twisted tip of his tail, and his brothers Rasta, Pretty Boy, and Makulu's brother. Tourists saw them as living legends. Researchers saw them as an ecological anomaly. The name Mapogo came from a Zulu word meaning unlimited power or relentless authority. It was an accurate description. No other coalition had ever exercised such control over an entire ecosystem. Where they roared, the rest fell silent. Rival lions disappeared. Buffalo migrated north. Jackals abandoned their breeding grounds. By the end of 2008, the Mapogos had reached their peak. They ruled over more than 8 prides and dozens of kilometers of savanna. But amid this apparent stability, something was beginning to change. Within the group, a young male stood out, not only for his strength, but also for his different behavior. Mr. T, with his thick mane and dominant attitude, began to challenge Makulu's hierarchy. His rise would mark the beginning of a new era, the most violent of all. By the end of 2006, the Mapogo coalition had established itself as a stable and organized structure. 6 males, united by survival and strength, dominated a territory larger than that of any other group in the region. Although they moved together, there was a defined order within the group. Experience, size, and aggressiveness determined the hierarchy. At the top was Makulu, the oldest. With a black mane and a solid build, he was the group's leader. His age gave him a tactical advantage. He knew the routes, the river crossings, and the patterns of the prey. His leadership was not symbolic. He imposed himself through strength and consistency. Where Makulu moved, the group responded. At his side was Mr. T, younger, compact in build, with dark fur and a distinctive fringe on his neck. His behavior was different. He did not act in constant coordination with Makulu. He preferred to move around specific areas, reinforcing his individual control. His fighting ability and his drive to patrol made him a relentless enforcer within the coalition. The third key member was Kinky Tail. Named for the twisted shape of the tip of his tail, he was Mr. T's closest ally, accompanying him on most of his movements. The two formed an operational subgroup within the main coalition. Their patrols were fast and aggressive, and they were repeatedly observed eliminating lone males without waiting for reinforcements. The other 3, Rasta, Pretty Boy, and Makulu's brother, played a supporting role. Rasta stood out for his size and vigor, useful in hunting buffalo. Pretty Boy, more reserved, followed Makulu in the western areas, while Makulu's brother reinforced control of the north. Although less documented, their participation was essential to maintaining territorial cohesion during the early years. During 2007 and 2008, the coalition's behavior became more specialized. Instead of moving as a single group, they temporarily split up to cover larger areas. This pattern, observed by field guards, allowed the Mapogos to control up to 8 prides simultaneously. Their system was simple but effective. Constant rotation, continuous surveillance, and immediate elimination of any intruding males. Field records document more than 40 confirmed confrontations with other adult lions during that period. In almost all cases, the Mapogos emerged victorious. Their numerical superiority and combat experience guaranteed the outcome. Many bodies of rival males were found at the edges of their territory, reinforcing their reputation for invincibility. The ecological impact continued to grow. With each conquest, they eliminated the cubs of previous males to ensure their own offspring. This biological pattern, amplified by the size of the coalition, drastically reduced the juvenile lion population in the region. Between 2007 and 2009, the density of adult lions in Sabi Sand remained stable, but the number of cubs fell by almost half. By 2009, the internal balance began to shift. Makulu's age contrasted with the vitality of the younger lions. Mr. T and Kinky Tail, increasingly active, began to exert dominance over entire areas without their original leader. There were no open confrontations, but the territorial division marked a silent transition. The Mapogos had reached the peak of their power, but the fault lines were already present, and with them the prelude to a war that would not come from outside, but from within. Between 2007 and 2009, the Mapogos reached the height of their dominance. Their power was not limited to a single region. It spanned miles of savanna, stretching from the banks of the Sand River to the wooded areas of Manyeleti. Within their territory, the natural hierarchy had been altered. During those years, the 6 males controlled the life cycle of almost all the prides in the area. The coalition imposed its presence with daily patrols. Every trail, every mark on the trees, every nighttime roar served as a warning. Groups of lionesses stayed within the boundaries defined by them, and any intruder was detected and eliminated. In the wild, order is maintained by force, and the Mapogos represented it in its purest form. Field records indicate that during this phase, the Mapogos controlled up to 8 different prides, each with females at different reproductive stages. This guaranteed them continuous offspring and the natural replacement of cubs eliminated in other groups. But the same cycle that ensured their lineage led to a drastic decline in the overall lion population in Sabi Sand. In less than 3 years, deaths attributed to the Mapogos exceeded 100. Adult males, subadults, and even newborn cubs were exterminated on a scale never seen before. Local observers began to refer to this period as the Era of Terror. For researchers, it was the clearest example of the ecological impact that a single coalition could have on an entire ecosystem. During dry nights, the air was filled with roars that echoed from one end of the territory to the other. Hyenas, once abundant, reduced their incursions into the area. Leopards retreated to rockier areas. The Mapogos' dominance affected not only other lions, but also the overall behavior of competing species. The ecological balance of Sabi Sand had been reconfigured. Makulu remained the central figure, but the operational weight increasingly fell on the younger lions. Mr. T and Kinky Tail led the raids, while the others reinforced the border areas. Their coordination was precise, the result of years of shared hunting and combat. The coalition functioned as a single entity, guided by instinct and efficiency. With almost total control of the territory, the Mapogos became a media phenomenon. Documentaries, photographs, and studies began to record them as a biological and social anomaly. Never in recent history had 6 males maintained such extensive dominance for so long. Each appearance generated attention and fear among those who observed them. However, within that apparent stability, signs of change were beginning to emerge. The age of some members contrasted with the aggressiveness of the younger ones. Mr. T, increasingly active and dominant, moved eastward with Kinky Tail, patrolling independently. What began as a functional division would soon become a definitive separation. The era of absolute power was reaching its peak, and with it, the beginning of its fragmentation. The Mapogos had achieved what no other coalition had ever achieved, reigning over all of Sabi Sand. But in the history of the savannah, all dominion has a limit, and their downfall would begin from within. Stay tuned for the next part to find out how the Mapogos themselves divided and unleashed a war that would mark the end of their empire. Tell us which country you are watching from and what you think was the most decisive moment in this story. Your voice also leaves its mark on this African legend. In 2010, the Mapogo coalition reached a critical point. After years of absolute dominance, internal stability began to fracture. The territory they controlled was too vast to sustain a unified structure. Prey moved, prides dispersed and competition for resources increased. The cohesion that had guaranteed their reign began to give way to the demands of the environment. The separation was neither immediate nor violent. During the first few months, a growing distance was observed between two distinct groups. Makulu, Rasta, and Pretty Boy maintained control of the west, while Mr. T and Kinky Tail operated increasingly in the east, near the Londolozi and Manuletti areas. What initially appeared to be a functional division ended up becoming a definitive fracture. There were multiple causes. Makulu's advanced age reduced his mobility. In contrast, Mr. T and Kinky Tail maintained an intense patrol rhythm, responding aggressively to any intruder. Their movements covered kilometers per night, allowing them to dominate new areas. In practice, the Mapogos were no longer a single coalition, but two distinct units, each with their own interests and strategies. The Eastern Territory, under Mr. T and Kinky Tail, became an area of permanent conflict. There, incursions by young coalitions were on the rise. One of them, later known as the Majingilan, began to dispute the borders. At first, the clashes were sporadic. Later, they turned into open battles. Mr. T led several of these clashes, maintaining his reputation for aggression and lethal efficiency. Meanwhile, in the west, Makulu and his followers focused on preserving the remaining prides. Without the full force of the six, their control was more fragile, but still effective. During this period, researchers documented a notable decrease in activity among both groups, a clear sign of the split. Africa's most powerful coalition no longer existed as a single entity. In June 2011, the division reached its climax. Kinky Tail was surprised by the Majingilanes in a confrontation on the Sand River. Outnumbered, he was surrounded and killed. His body was left on the riverbank, marking the end of the duo that had maintained the eastern balance. Days later, Mr. T returned to the site, found the remains, and remained there for hours, patrolling the area until dawn. From then on, he continued alone. His isolation marked the beginning of the end. Mr. T continued to confront the Majingilane for months, with sporadic attacks and nighttime ambushes. His body, covered in scars, reflected years of continuous combat. Field records show that even outnumbered, he managed to repel several invasion attempts. However, the balance had already shifted. The coalition that had dominated Sabi Sand for years was in ruins. In the west, the remaining Mapogos, Makulu, Rasta, and Pretty Boy maintained their zone with discretion. They avoided direct contact with the east and rarely crossed the river. The link between the two groups had been severed. What was once an emblem of power and cooperation had been transformed into two fragments weakened by distance and time. The fall of Kinky Tail and the isolation of Mr. He symbolized the collapse of the Mapogo Empire. Internal wars and pressure from new coalitions brought an era to a close. But even as their dominance crumbled, their name was already inscribed in the history of the savannah, the six males who rewrote the rules of animal power. By 2011, the Mapogos' dominance was a thing of the past. Of the six males who had controlled Sabi Sand, only 3 remained in the west and 1 in the east. The territory was divided, and new coalitions occupied the spaces that had once echoed with their roars. At the center of this ruin remained Mr. T, the last guardian of the power that had shaped the region. After Kinky Tail's death, Mr. T continued to patrol the east of Sabi Sand. He maintained the same territorial behavior, night patrols, scent marking, and prolonged roars. His pattern had not changed. He simply carried it out alone. For months, he repelled minor incursions by young males and survived injuries that would have been fatal to most. Each confrontation reinforced his image as an extreme survivor, the product of years of continuous combat. His territory gradually shrunk. The Majingilane, 4 young and coordinated males, advanced from the north and west. Their presence altered the balance. In a single season, they displaced several herds and eliminated minor rivals. Mr. T resisted as long as he could, moving between wooded areas and waterways. His tracks were recorded by rangers at irregular intervals, indicating a life in constant motion. Direct confrontations intensified in mid-2011. On several occasions, the Majingilane were observed following his trail. The sounds of crossed roars marked the nights leading up to the final confrontation. Mr. T, without support or stable territory, remained active, hunting on his own and using old lookout points near the Sand River. On June 16, 2011, the sequence concluded. The Majingilane located Mr. T in the eastern area near the banks of Dudley Riverbank. The encounter was swift and decisive, 4 against 1. Visual records and field testimonies describe a brief confrontation with roars and dust rising above the dry grass. When it was over, Mr. T's body lay motionless. His dark mane, recognizable even in the shadows, marked the end of the last warrior of the coalition. Mr. T's death symbolized more than the fall of an individual. It was the closing of an ecological cycle. The arrival of the Majingilane represented the natural generational change in the social structure of the lions in the region. The space occupied by the Mapogos was absorbed by new males, new prides, and a new order. The landscape, witness to their rise and fall, slowly returned to equilibrium. In the months that followed, traces of the former empire disappeared. The roars that once dominated the savanna were replaced by others. Prey returned to abandoned areas, and the activity of hyenas and leopards normalized. Nature resumed its rhythm, indifferent to the rain that had defied all previous rules. Photographic records and field reports preserved the evidence. Mr. E's story was integrated into the Sabi Sand archives as an exceptional case. A single male who resisted beyond the biological limit of the species, facing entire coalitions until his last day. With his death, the Mapogo coalition ceased to exist. What began as an invincible alliance ended up fragmented by time and competition. However, its impact persisted. For 6 years, they altered the demographics of lions throughout the region and redefined scientific understanding of cooperation and intraspecific violence. In 2011, the era of the Mapogos came to an end, but their mark was etched into the history of the African savanna. When the last of the Mapogos disappeared in 2011, the Sabi Sand region began a slow process of recovery. Young coalitions, led by the Majingilane, occupied the empty territories, reorganizing boundaries and re-establishing the social structure of the lions. During the first few months, researchers noticed an immediate change. The number of nighttime roars decreased, and the prides moved around with less tension. The impact of the Mapogos remained visible long after. In field records, their reign is described as an extreme biological phenomenon. In 6 years, their presence altered the population density, territorial distribution, and behavior of other species. Hyenas, previously scattered, gradually returned to areas they had avoided for years. Buffalo and rhinos, the coalition's main prey, showed a progressive increase in their populations. In ecological terms, their story demonstrated the magnitude that a single coalition can have on a closed ecosystem. By eliminating rival males and controlling the reproduction of multiple prides, the Mapogos reduced the temporary genetic variability of lions in the region. Subsequent studies confirmed that during their dominance, most of the cubs born in Sabi Sand were their direct descendants. The impact of their behavior also changed the scientific interpretation of the concept of a supercoalition. Until then, groups of 6 adult males were considered unstable due to internal competition. The Mapogos demonstrated that, under certain environmental conditions, abundant prey, ample space, and minimal human pressure, a large coalition could maintain itself for years and exercise total territorial control. Veteran guides in the area began to recount the Mapogos era as a time of imbalance and fascination. There was no previous record of a coalition that had eliminated so many rivals. Official reports spoke of more than 40 adult males killed and more than 100 cubs missing or executed. Each record, accompanied by precise coordinates and dates, showed the true extent of their dominance. By 2015, the side effects of their disappearance were evident. The new generations of lions showed a more dispersed and less violent structure. Subsequent coalitions rarely exceeded 3 members. The ecosystem, after years of instability, had regained a more predictable dynamic. However, the memory of the Mapogos remained in the stories, images, and physical marks on the landscape. Between 2016 and 2020, the story of the coalition began to transcend the scientific realm. Documentaries, studies, and field photography archives turned their lives into a must-see reference in African ethology. The Mapogos went from being subjects of observation to becoming a legend, not because of symbolism, but because of the numbers and facts that altered the balance of an entire ecosystem. The lions that currently occupy Sabi Sand, distant descendants of their lineage, live in a savanna different from the one Mahulu or Mr. T knew. The landscape was reconfigured, the borders changed, and the roars that once instilled fear are now part of a historical memory. But the echo of that coalition remains present in every guide, every park ranger, and every archive that documents the evolution of the place. The legacy of the Mapogos is neither a fable nor a metaphor. It is a documented ecological fact. 6 lions who, through cooperation and violence, transformed an entire ecosystem. Their story redefined the study of animal power and marked a turning point in the understanding of the natural hierarchy in Africa. Over time, the story of the Mapogos ceased to be merely a biological record and became an essential chapter in African wildlife history. Between 2006 and 2011, 6 lions demonstrated that nature does not respond to myths or human hierarchies. It responds to strength, numbers, and opportunity. Their rise, dominance, and fall represented the most extreme cycle documented in the modern history of the continent's large predators. Unlike other coalitions, the Mapogos were not an isolated phenomenon. They were the result of unique conditions: abundant prey, open territories, and the absence of human intervention. In this context, their existence revealed the limits of ecological balance and the magnitude of natural competition. There was no intention, only consequence. Every hunt, every conquest, and every loss was part of a process that forever transformed the structure of Sabi Sand. Their story also changed the scientific understanding of cooperation between males. Before them, coalitions were seen as temporary alliances. Afterwards, it was understood that they could evolve into dominant, coordinated systems capable of maintaining territories for years. The Mapogos did not share loyalty. They shared power. On the ground, the traces of their reign still remain. The routes they traveled are still marked on the ground, and the descendants of their females continue to inhabit the same plains. Every roar heard in those lands is a distant echo of that time when 6 lions ruled with absolute power. For veteran guides and park rangers, the memory lives on. They talk about the nights when 6 roars echoed in unison, shaking the savannah. Those who witnessed their rise and fall know that it was not a legend. It was a reality that transcended the known limits of nature. Starting in 2020, their story transcended borders. Millions of people around the world learned their names, their battles, and their legacy. The Mapogos became a symbol of natural power, an example of how strength and unity can alter the destiny of an entire ecosystem. Today, the grasslands where they reigned are calm. The wind that blows through the dry grass no longer carries the roar of war, but the whisper of history. The Majingilans, the Birminghams, and new coalitions follow in their footsteps, but none have achieved the total dominance of the 6. In each generation of lions, the echo of the Mapogos lives on, not as a myth, but as a warning of unchecked power. Thus ends the chronicle of the Mapogos, 6 lions who transformed nature, dominated time, and left behind a lesson about absolute power and its inevitable price. If you want the force of life to accompany you and abundance to come your way, like this video, share it, and comment on where you are watching it from. Do it now, because the coming days will bring a miracle of prosperity and balance to your life. And if you want to honor this story and support our pride, use the Super Thanks button below. Whether it's $5, $20, or $100, every contribution helps us keep the real legends of Africa alive and continue telling the stories of the kings who once made the savannah tremble.